All right, we're going to wrap up a little bit on wholesaling and then move on to franchising. So, one of the lessons that we have to learn from wholesaling that is unique is because wholesaling is so specific generally to certain industries, and that wholesaling far beyond retailing, where retailing basically appeals to the masses. Usually, wholesaling applies to certain industries in certain unique ways. And so the general trend with wholesaling is that it'll be large but seldom global. And because of the specific natures of the industries that they work in, and the industries can be very unique. I mean, the oil field industry in the Gulf of Mexico is completely different from the oil industry in many other areas. Most wholesalers may never go truly global. And as a matter of fact, they wouldn't necessarily need to be, especially when you consider that situations become more complex and require a great more deal of cognitive efforts in being able to come up with solutions. And so it's not that international expansion, wouldn't be the willingness to do that, but quite simply, whether or not they would have successes or not, maybe not. Okay, so that's one of the lessons to kind of take away from it. I'm not going to ask much about electronic commerce on the test, if it might be one particular question or not. Just quite simply the fact that disintermediation, which is, we would talk about that as the removal of intermediaries in the structure, still kind of is it taken to advantage if you're using e-commerce or the omni-channelers or not. But you find that wholesaling has kind of co-opted e-commerce, especially when it comes to delivery environments. And so is it going to impact it? Maybe not. All right. So whether or not you could probably say something to the effect of is the impact is not affected yet. Let's just put it that way. Forgive me if I'm just running through these things, but they'll be on the record. Now, one thing that might is electronic exchanges. Electronic exchanges act as online brokers. If we're to look at the players, we talked about agents and brokers, and agents are independent organizations that represent one party, and brokers are organizations that affect two parties. Then yes, brokers can have a significant impact. They allow the buyers of similar products to source together and purchase multiple suppliers from a single location. And that is their single impact. Especially when you're talking about commodities. And commodities, in essence, are those non-specialized items. Remember, commodities generally are all about prices. And once again, I'm not going to say much more than that, but I do want to talk about reverse auctions. So I don't know if you've ever watched Shipping Wars. Shipping Wars is kind of an interesting take on the idea, but reverse auctions have been around for a while, and of course the internet has infinitely expanded it. So this is the way a reverse auction would work. So I have a good that I need to move from one location to the country to the next. So what I will do is I will go on an online website and I will say, this thing is this big, it weighs this much, I need to move it from the East Coast to the West Coast, I need the delivery by a given date, how much will that cost me? And so what happens is it would be like a half a dozen people who are bidding, and they would say, well, I can do this for $6,000. Somebody else will say, well, no, I'll undercut that. I'll do it for $5,800. And what happens is they cut through to the point where they all just give up. And whatever the lowest point is, that is what is expected. That is what a reverse auction is. It is where the bidding goes down to the lowest accepted price. And the problem with reverse auctions is the same problem that you have, especially in any service economy, is that it destroys relationships and that potential to generate the performance breakthroughs and new ideas. It basically takes your service requirements and turns them into commodities once again. And so the other part of that also is that when you reduce your prices to the point of nothing, you actually kind of reveal where your break-even point actually is. And so it's not a particular, what's the lack of a better word? Not the particular bailiwick where most wholesalers want to be. And the last thing to talk about is the one thing difficult about wholesaling is because it is so service oriented, it's always been difficult to calculate its true profitability. Because the goods so many times are transformed through the uses in the wholesalers that to track down its price ultimately becomes one of those great difficulties. You might see this question in such as say, what is one of the critical difficulties when it comes for fees for services? And you might see a multiple choice question on this is because it's very difficult to calculate the true profitability. And here's the problem is that if you wear down on price too hard, basically what happens at some point is distributors just feel like there's no point in going on. And so this is wholesale. I thoroughly, as I've said, I think it's a great industry for any of you who would like to get in it. Lots of money out there to make. Good long-term environment, especially for those of you in the supply chain. And if you're looking for an industry to invest in, I wholeheartedly endorse it. And that is our ending on wholesaling. So let's see. What that? I'll be damned. I didn't see that. Excuse me, that guy right there. So let me go back to the other one. This guy on the far right here is Bobby Hugh. Makes me call him Robert now when he returns my phone calls. I actually went to school with him in St. John High School in Gulfport, Mississippi. He's from my brother's class. Bobby never washed his practice uniforms when he played football. And by the end of the year, you could like stand his jersey in the corner. He was just one of those guys, you never forget in school. Anyway, when Bobby got his undergraduate degree at Southern Miss, Bobby headed to North Carolina. I don't know what got him in this direction, but one of the things that he did was he started as a pizza maker at Domino's. This was just in the late 70s and early 80s. And so there was an aggressive management program going on. And so after about 4 or 5 years as a pizza flipper, Bobby became an owner of a franchise. And so Bobby eventually, as things moved on and they encouraged individuals who had experience to move on in a franchise environment, Bobby got more franchises. last year, or excuse me, this year was the 50th anniversary of the 1973 graduates, of which my brother is a alumni of that. And Bobby came back to Gulfport, and so did my brother, and was talking to Bobby. Bobby owns 53 franchises now. And I was interested in that thing, that property development. Lynn asked Bobby how is his franchises or how much they're worth. And he said, well, I'm not sure about the franchises. He said, but the property that I own from them is worth $168 million. And so this is a guy with an undergraduate degree who started as a pizza flipper with Domino's. And it kind of underscores just the enormous potential that's in franchising if you're in the right place, in the right time, with the right effort. So he said he's probably going to sell his franchises, but he's going to keep the 17 smoothie franchises that he has because he likes to keep his fingers in the pie a little bit. Just a great guy. I mean, he really is one of the funniest guys I ever met too. So anyway, I'm using this kind of a lead in with franchising just to give you just a taste of where franchising is and why franchising, okay? So my retail professor, Dr. R.C. Vreeland, Richard C. Vreeland, back in the 70s when I was taking retailing, said franchising is one of the great ways to meld people with lots of money and little sense and make lots of money. And I thought that was pretty interesting. But franchising didn't start in the United States, but it really became successful in the United States for a lot of reasons. It basically solves many of the problems that our channel issues are, and it requires a certain amount of giving and taking on both sides, but it is successful in its way. I think there's about 140 franchises that are available in the world now. And so without further ado, let's talk about what makes franchising successful. Okay, so franchising has two key players. The two key players in the mix are the franchisors. The franchisors are the upstream corporate manufacturers of a product or originators of a service. They are the manufacturers of whatever product, service you need. The franchisees are independent, separate corporations with their own balance sheets and income statements that provide all of the marketing channel functions downstream. This is a very important slide. I mean, they're all important. This one is. It is a structure intended to convince the end users that they're buying from a vertically integrated manufacturer, but they're not. If you were to drive by McDonald's and you were to get to the drive-in window in less than 10 minutes of these things, but if you look there, there's a bronze plaque there that says owned and operated by such and such corporation. They're an independent corporation separate from McDonald's. And yet they inhibit their identity for the sake of taking over the brand name of McDonald's. This is a key phrase, and this even by itself could be one 10-point essay question. The hallmark of franchising is the deliberate loss of a self-identity. The franchises that you drive up, pay your money to, and walk away from are not the corporate. Now, there are some company stores, but franchising in itself, the deliberate loss of the separate identity is the hallmark of franchising. They have their own unique reasons for being in business. They don't necessarily are there to grow beyond where they are. They simply can't. But they have paid a certain amount of money to assume the identity of a larger corporate structure in which they gain power. So they are two independent organizations, the franchisor, the large corporate organization. There is the lower downstream organization, and they join forces together to perform the marketing functions, the channel functions, to their mutual benefit. And for the benefit, the power of the McDonald's name, the franchisees compromise their independence. In other words, they accept interdependence as a matter of choice in contracts. And they gain enormously by doing it. There is no intra-competition between franchises because franchisors guarantee autonomy within the area that the franchisors are. And once a franchisee has achieved growth, they can turn their operations into company-owned and managed outlets if they want to. The franchisee, spit out, Dave. The franchisee has a separate business, their own balance sheet, and their own income statement. And there is no question that franchising is the fastest form of retailing for many reasons. The biggest one being capital and capital growth, because you can't grow without money. They're not perfect, but the flexibility within the structure gives lots of room for growth. It makes it easy, as I said, for someone with limited experience, but lots of money to be able to gain experience and get more money. That's kind of the name of the game. So, what are the benefits to the downstream partners for this? What are they? Well, if anyone has ever been, well, I've run 3 businesses and I'm still running a fourth now. All right. So I know what it's like to be in a business. And for those of you who have never done it before, it is a humbling experience. Any of you have ever, well, if you ever have to do 941 quarterly deductions, you'll understand what I mean, because you pay them before you pay anyone else, which is your unemployment insurance. All right. Yes, you get the personal fulfillment if you go out and earn your own business, but you have to have acceptance of the risk of creating businesses as well. And it also depends particularly what business you go into. So like 90% of all restaurants fail within the first 3 years of business. Interestingly enough, 60% of all hardware stores succeed. Sometimes it's just the business. Anything that gives you the opportunity to exercise your freedoms and allow you to get the things that you really desire needs to be considered. A franchising arrangement can be the perfect combination. The franchisor comes up with a business format, a road path to success. The franchisor buys that road path with a prepackaged number of solutions to problems that the franchisor knows about. And the experience that the franchisor brings to the franchisee enhances the chances for success. Now, there are 3 benefits that every franchisee gets. And so I'm going to talk at these one at a time. and site selection, brand name, and economies of scale. So does anybody want to guess how much the land that McDonald's sits on, how much it's worth in Boone? How much would you think? About $1.5 million, 2 million. Anybody want to guess how much the land that Wendy's sits on is worth?
Yeah, it's like that big intersection, so it's gotta be one, maybe more.
4.5 million. Yeah, that little square there. There's not a coincidence that it's a 2-story Wendy's, by the way. Okay, that little store, as a matter of fact, for years has led Wendy's sales in Western Carolina. Believe it or not, it's a perfect location. It's in the perfect place in a tourist town, and it is solid gold. All right. Now, just imagine if you're trying to start a franchise and you have to cough up $4.5 million to first even get in. And so one of the things that helps is McDonald's and other large locations like that. Once a franchise is accepted, they do the site selection for you, find the best location, and they buy the land. Now it's golden handcuffs, all right, because it means you can only locate in that particular area. You have to buy the building. You build it in one of the pre-12 select different ways that McDonald's has their franchises, but you don't have that out-of-pocket fund from the very beginning. Furthermore, McDonald's does site selection surveys, will help make sure the traffic routes properly. It's one of the difficulties, of course, with Boone, because you just don't have land to go anywhere, all right? But one of the things that McDonald's does is they try to do their best to alleviate traffic problems. Interesting, I said it was in Charlotte the last class, but it was actually in Gastonia. There was a Chick-fil-A, and everybody knows about the Chick-fil-A drive-through. But in Gastonia, they were having real issues with a Chick-fil-A franchise being at a given location that was backing up traffic for hours. And so what was the franchise to do? The franchisee, do they have the money to do anything about it? And this is once again where you have the big shoulders of a franchisor to come up with a solution. They tore it down. Yes. They tore down the Chick-fil-A franchise, built a special drive-through Chick-fil-A across the street, and helped the city build a routing and alleviated the traffic problems. There's the thing that you can do, a franchisor can help you with that you could not have found a solution by yourself, okay? So site selection is a big thing. It's a huge thing. And also, site selection also is consistent with whatever a franchisor's image is. Enterprise rent-a-car is kind of unique in the rent-a-car companies. You find them at airports, but that's not who their customers are. Enterprise rent-a-car is built around those individuals who need to rent a car for a trip, or they need to rent it for their own cars in the shop. And so where Hertz and Avis, the average rentals are like 2 days, Enterprise rent-a-cars are 7 to 9. And so they like the enterprise rent-a-cars to be in suburbia, wherever that might be. And so site selection is all about maximizing success. And that's the reason they do that one. By the way, Walmart and McDonald's are second and third in number of property owned in the United States, number one being, of course, the federal government. So that's first, site selection. The next is brand name. So my wife loves Pizza Hut. And when Pizza Hut left, I thought to myself, when the Pizza Hut moved out of the place that it was before, I thought to myself, why would you move Pizza Hut out? What else could possibly go there to make money? Silly me, they put in a gas station. Then they put the Pizza Hut back then, they moved it. And by the way, for a while there was a thought right next to the Pizza Hut there was going to be a Dunkin' Donuts. And dang it, I wish they did. Because now there's a Krispy Kreme going, so we don't have Dunkin'. I can't with that. I can't with that anyway. But anyway, the brand name Pizza Hut brought people back. It started out making money. And so there's the advantage of a brand name. It brings people to you. And so the other thing that a franchisee can get is it can have a natural clientele that is drawn to your particular name. The last thing for a franchisee is that I have economies of scale. Remember that the natural thing that a channel does is it pools demand. So think of all of the thousands of McDonald's that are out there with all of their demand, instead of having to go anywhere else, pooled all up through a single direction upstream to McDonald's corporate, where all of those goods can be collectively bargained at one time. And McDonald's has enormous power to bargain their goods that they ship in. And of course, McDonald's makes money off of the goods that they ship back to the franchisee, but the franchisee does not have to worry about demand. Except I can't understand why they can't keep the ice cream machine working. Okay, who knows? You also get preferred customer status with the outside service providers. So one of the things I recommend to all of you, if you own a business or want to, the first thing you've got to do is develop credit references. It's the most important thing for success, all right? You do not want to stay COD, cashier's check, all your life. You want to be able to go 210 net 30 eventually. That takes time to build trade references. If I've got McDonald's on my hand and I have paid the franchise fee and say, I walk in and say, excuse me, I'm trying to open $1 million franchise on this street. Yeah, my good credit risk, you've gone from D to quad A, all right? That's the advantage of having the big shoulders of a large organization. And so these are the three advantages that you have in the startup package. You have credibility right off the bat, and you're starting the ground running. The next is the ongoing benefits. This first sentence is going to be critical. And yes, it'll be a test question in there. The important thing to remember is that a franchise is not about launching a business, it's about successfully running a business. It is the long-term success which counts. Anyone can open a business. Keeping it running is ultimately what it's all about. So I worked for a Radio Shack Computer Center as a franchise in Lafayette, Louisiana. This is 1982. And every day we had to run our daily reports to Radio Shack corporate. So we went on the 300 baud modem and we type in this pre-designed software on our PCs, our 4.77 megahertz machines. We get together with all the calculations, connect with a 300 baud modem, and in 15 minutes, our 2K worth of data would finally make it upstream. Same stuff we've been doing now for 40 years. But one of the advantages that we have now is we have artificial intelligence. We have analytics. We have machines that can calculate and contemplate data. And so the daily supervision, the reports that you have to send every day in order to be part of a franchise is brought into those machines, and they can tell how well you're doing, if you're approaching your goals, are there red flags that need to be taken care of. And so what happens eventually is that with all of the stuff that they're required to submit, the franchisors can see when you're getting into trouble, can offer advice, and even bring somebody down to spend time with you to straighten out your problems. And so that's a great ongoing benefit. If I'm a McDonald's with how many franchises they have, I've seen everything just about. And they can come in and make suggestions to be able to keep you moving in a direction of success and alleviate problems before they ever happen. And so The ongoing benefits of being a franchisee are gigantic. A franchisor is a consolidator of a channel, practically vertical market. They achieve scale, which means the bigness, and scope, which means they focus narrowly on their particular success. And because I can focus on one line, I can benefit from the specialization. I build my portfolio of services and goods that I have based around that particular brand. If I'm a McDonald's and I sell fast food and sandwiches, I can stretch outside and find new and successful fast food. And then the key also is to know when to turn the spigot on and when to turn it off. One of the smart things that McDonald's does is they know what goods will sell and how to sell them and how long they've got it. So the McRib sandwich will come out, McRib is back, and it'll be out for like 6 weeks, because once you've had 2 bites, you've just about had enough, okay? And then they take them off the market, and then it's like, oh yeah, I wonder when the McRib is coming back, okay? Those are the kinds of things that you breed from success. They can't figure out how to make a burger that adults like. I don't know why, but maybe one day. Okay, now I take that back. I just mean the standard kind of burger that especially Comeback Shack specializes. Okay. One of the things also it does is it prevents free riding. And so, in other words, a franchise in one place doesn't educate one particular group and somebody else goes and get that from someone else. That's eliminated because the franchisor guarantees autonomy. Everybody stays within their lane. The franchisor acts as a traffic cop, making sure that everybody plays by the game. And this is one of the things that dual distribution can't do, because you've given up your idea of being autonomous. You have that consistency, but also you attract the customers, and it is in essence one happy family. So what do we get? What does the franchisor get? One of the biggest difficulties in the growth of organizations is capital, both human capital and financial capital. Many a great idea has died on the vine for lack of human potential to make it work and the money to make it grow. I've said this in this class almost for like 8 years now. I think one of the franchises within Boom that could go as and not a franchise, but a local place that could go as a franchise is Comeback Shack. Okay. I really think they could franchise. They've actually got one in Myrtle Beach, but that's just another company store. But if they ever wanted to franchise that, they've got a nice, neat look. They've got a market that could go to tourist locations like Myrtle Beach. I thought that was a smart move. But if they ever wanted to grow and grow fast, you've got to be able to hit the ground running with their concepts. I love the roll open door, especially when the weather's good. I think that is so awesome. It really is smart, okay? But an idea like that yet can be easily copied. So you'd need capital and you'd need it fast. If I require a franchise fee and I've got this way of doing business, I've put together this package, Then what I do is I gain first mover advantage. My operation goes from big to huge. My franchisees who are willing to invest will bring sufficient financial resources to play. Not only that, but the people who are applicants to my location who would like to do work for me, they could become franchisees as well. This is what happened with Bobby. He became a managerial applicant within Domino's. He became a franchisee, on to success. That ability to go out and start your own franchises, make your staff more than just staff people. They become claimers of the firm's profits. They have a sense of loyalty in the franchise system that they're working for because they have the chance to gain those benefits if they want to. Not only that, but focusing in this area, the franchisees also become conduits of a vision of possible new places to go from things that happen locally. So this is a real example. So I grew up in Long Beach, Mississippi. I lived in Louisiana for many years. There's a very strong Catholic influence in that area and even into secular holidays, even though you're not Catholic. So one of those is the start of Lent. So Mardi Gras or Carnival means without meat. And that is the carnival season. After January 6th, which is known as Little Christmas, we start counting towards Mardi Gras. And so Mardi Gras is the celebration that's based upon Carnival in Europe, where you would go towards the 40 days of Lent. Carnival meant that you enjoyed yourself to prepare for the fasting for the next 40 days coming to Easter. One of the traditions, not demanded, but just one of those things is accepted culturally, is that Friday you don't eat meat, you eat fish. And so one of the things that was very popular on Fridays in Louisiana is things like fish sandwiches. It was a natural progression for McDonald's to take the suggestions from Louisiana, create the fish sandwich, and that's why we have the fish sandwich today. And it's been copied many times over. And so this is an example of the franchisees coming up with this idea where they adapted, they diffused the best ideas across the franchises, carry them upstream, and then share them out. That's an example. Once again, the franchisees are not competing against each other. They're cooperating with each other. They're all trying to share the best ideas. And so the situation, instead of becoming intra-brand competition, becomes a sharing of success. So this is an example in Pizza Hut. So when I went to South Korea and I taught there for 7 weeks, loved South Korea. People were just wonderful. It was great. But one of the things that one of their alleged things is they have a dislike for cheese. So this is a true thing. I wish I kept the wrapper, but they were trying to come up with flavors of Cheetos to be able to sell to Asian markets. And so they did test markets in China and in South Korea, Japan, and they came up with a Cheetos flavor of Kobe beef. And that's what sells. In other words, it's Cheetos without cheese. It's just the crunch, okay? So Pizza Hut, worried about this well-documented dislike for cheese. And there was a man by the name of William Heineke who said, I don't care, just let me spend the money. I'll take the risk. I'll take the reward. Pizza Hut went, sure, why not? Knock yourself out. And they did tons of business, all right? Once again, maybe only 10% like cheese, But 10% of 60 million people, that's a lot of people. So maybe it's worth your effort. The franchisor doesn't always know what's the best thing. You might be able to solve problems that the national audience doesn't even notice, but the franchisee, if they solve the problem downstream, passes those ideas up, and you can ultimately achieve success. It is a successful open conduit for dialogue between downstream and upstream. And so there are distinct advantages to the franchisee and to the franchisor. And now I come to the contra, because I always do. Sometimes you don't want a franchise. So Starbucks never ever wanted a franchise. Of course, this is not true, because in certain countries, especially the communist ones, you have to franchise. That's just the rule. But Starbucks in the United States grew because every Starbucks is a company out there. And their argument is, and this can be true, is that franchising leads firms to expand too quickly. And that errors can propagate in the system before you have a chance to correct them. The thought of Starbucks criticizing anybody from expanding too quickly is bad. That's their argument. What they believe instead that's better is to offer stock options. And that's the way you get your employees to buy in. And I think the basic point of this is that expansion for an organization is not the only viable way. And once again, if I were going to come up with a reason why with Starbucks especially, is that idiosyncratic benefit that you get when you walk in and enjoy the vibe of Starbucks and are willing to spend 15 minutes in a line for a cup of coffee. Okay. So granted, it's not the only way, but it's a pretty darn good one. And that's where we're going to break today. Okay. So Tuesday is when the position papers are due. I think I looked, it's like November 21st is the next exam, and I think we're online for that. And so I hope you all have a good weekend.
I have a question,
Yes.
just to be sure, the position papers are still in a group, right?
Yes.
Okay. You did say.
Second exam's online.
I didn't, no, you didn't hear that.
Okay.
No.
All right.
No.
I think I heard that.